Good evening, guys. Welcome to Weekend Warrior Podcast. My name is Ruan Heiberg, for the guys that don't know me. And with me tonight, as usual, is my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. Grobby Brink, back in action with me. And I will leave it to him to introduce our illustrious guest for tonight. I'm super excited.
Yes, guys. A big welcome to our guest, Jill Heinerth. Did I pronounce that right, Jill?
Yeah, you sure did.
Yes. She's Wikipedia, in very short, describes her as a Canadian cave diver, an underwater explorer, and a writer, photographer, and filmmaker. Guys, I don't want to sound a little bit silly, but this lady is hard as coffin nails. We've been discussing what she's been up to and what she does for a living. Jill, a big fan. I'm like I've said earlier when we met today, I'm busy reading your book. It's fantastic stuff. I've seen a lot of your content online. Guys, this lady has done it all in terms of diving, and especially in the dangerous world of cave diving. And yes, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you on. This is going to be epic. Like I said, I've been a scuba diver for years, and had the opportunity to do some cave diving. And to put it mildly, I backed down because I did not have the balls. I'm sorry, that's simple as that. Welcome to the show. I know we're a little bit of the time difference from South Africa to Canada, but yes. And to start it all off, literally, where did it start for you? Welcome to the show again.
Yeah. Well, I started diving in Canada. I wanted to dive from the time I was the littlest kid, but my parents said, "Oh, honey, people don't dive in Canada. It's too cold." So I actually didn't start diving until I was in university. I had a first experience as a teenager, but I didn't get qualified until I was in university, and had saved my own money to buy gear and take the classes. But I started in a place called Tobermory, which is now a national underwater marine sanctuary protecting the Great Lakes shipwrecks. So freshwater shipwrecks. We have 35,000 wooden shipwrecks in the Canadian Great Lakes, and we know of the location of 6,000 of them. So if this isolation thing continues, I've got still a world of stuff left to explore, within driving range of the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jill, what you say you went to university? What did you study? I assume it's not archaeology or something like you're doing now.
No, I'm an artist, actually. So I studied fine arts in university, and yet a lot of people think I'm a scientist because a lot of the work that I do, I play one on TV, right? I mean, a lot of work I do is with scientific expeditions, but I literally become the hands and eyes, a citizen scientist for scientists who've spent their entire life specializing in some particular focus of work. And because they've spent their entire life studying one thing, they have not had the time to develop the diving skills and background and technology that I have in order to either go into a cave or go deep or in really cold environments under the ice. So it sets up a really nice relationship where the artist and the scientist collaborate together.
Oh, wow. So you're pretty much what they would call a drone, just going to do their stuff for them in the places that they can't get to. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or bringing things to scientists that I've never heard anyone write about. Be like, hey, I found this cool animal. Does this exist anywhere else? And it's like, well, let's have a look. And yeah. So oftentimes I'll bring some discovery to a scientist and try and entice them into what I'm doing to bring purpose.
Silly question. Did you know you had the stomach or the mental fortitude from this early on? Was there signs that you were tough and good under pressure and under stressful situations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always been super strong, tough, and always super outdoorsy, high pain tolerance, high discomfort tolerance. But I don't think anything fully prepares you to deal with like mind-blowing terror of a like an emergency underwater until you've had a series of these progressive experiences, I guess. Because I think that dealing with fear in a healthy way and being able to cope in an emergency situation is something that's kind of learned over time, both from diving and life experiences.
But Jill, if so, you did the kind of the normal diving qualifications and stuff, but from the research that I've done for tonight, I understand that the real cave diving fraternity that can dive at the level that you do it is ridiculously small. I heard a number of like less than 100 people in the whole world have the technical skills and ability to do what you do. So how did the road go from being a diving artist
diver,
to I mean, did they say, okay, we need somebody to go into that hole and you just like put your hand up, or what? How did that happen?
I mean, sort of, yeah. It's funny because people say, well, how do you get to do what you do? And I'm like, well, I'm like a 30-year overnight success, right? Like,
That's always the story. That's always the story.
Actually, more than 30 years now, of diving experiences that got me here. But yeah, a lot of what I've done in an expeditionary sense started with volunteering for a project, working my butt off, and then when an opportunity opened up, going, pick me, I want to do this, and then taking the plunge. I look back at some of the earliest experiences I had, and some of them are a little cringeworthy. Like, oh God, I'd never do that again. You certainly develop wisdom over time that you don't have when you're in your 20s and 30s. But yeah, I think that all the experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, the successes and the failures have built who I am today.
Yeah, it's like when I started my pilot training, one of the sayings that really stuck with me: there's no such thing as an old bald pilot. You get old pilots and you get bold pilots. And I think it's very similar when it comes to diving. And really interesting.
Yeah, I use an aviation thing for my students too, where I'll say, takeoffs are optional, landings are mandatory, right? So make sure you make a good choice before you take off. In fact, if you do make those good choices before you go underwater, there's really very little that can go wrong if you really thoroughly and properly prepared. Yeah.
I was going to leave this question to last, dude. But one of my big things is that an author that I really like, he tends to ask a question and he says, "What's that big mistake or a failure that you had that actually spurred you on to success?" And every time I think about how am I going to rephrase that for you, it's like, hang on, your mistakes tend to people die. It's such a harsh environment. But I suppose there must have been times where you go, hang on, what I did there was a mistake, but I came out on top. But at the end of the day, I need to learn from it. It boggles the mind about the risk and the technical ability. And that was one of the questions, is like, your preparation must be crazy. Getting everything ready, technically, equipment wise, planning wise, and then executing it. It must be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Well, like cave divers use, like in training, we use something called accident analysis, where that's how we came up with the golden rules for cave diving, is by looking at what happened and the mistakes that people made. And in all frankness, I've lost over 100 friends throughout my career to deaths in cave and technical diving. And so I have to be extremely analytical, looking at what choices they made, what was the root cause of their mistakes, and have I made mistakes in my career? Oh, plenty. Plenty that I would never do again. Plenty that could have cost me my life, and I just happened to be more lucky on a given day than one of those people that didn't make it.
Jill, you mentioned the golden rules of cave diving. Is rule number
Mhm.
1, don't do it?
Well, yeah. Well, and anyone can call the dive at any time for any reason. So
Okay, but tell us the rules. Tell us the rules.
yeah, so we always have a continuous guideline to the exit, like all the way out to the open water. And you would be amazed at how many people violate that basic rule. They go into this place that looks incredibly clear, and they just assume they're going to be able to backtrack and follow their way back
It's
out
going to stay
again.
like that forever, yeah.
And it doesn't. In a cave, it never does. Even the best diver in the world will create a wake just through traveling through a space, and bubbles will knock things off the ceiling, and visibility is easily obliterated to the point where you have to hold on to that guideline and come all the way out.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've read that silt is probably the biggest cause of disorientation.
Yeah.
In the spaces. Yeah. No, look, like I said, small space. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4"
Mhm.
and 100 and odd kilos. We've got the Kango Caves just around the corner from us, and you can actually go very deep into it. And there's spaces where they say if you're big, you can't go through here.
Mhm.
I was getting stuck in normal spaces where people were just gliding through. And again, that's why little heart palpitations. I feel like a little girl when I go, like a little baby girl that's afraid of something. And
No, well, that's healthy. It means you're normal. It means that you want to come home to your family, right? That's normal.
But Jill, now I need to ask the question. I mean, you say it's normal. We talked about it just before the show in the studio. I watch one of your TED Talks, and you're talking, and then you've got this scene in the background, and there's this video clip of you, and it's a space about half a meter. I'm guessing half a meter, but based on what I've seen, and you're, for all practical purposes, wiggling on your stomach through this little cavity thing, and I'm thinking to myself, looking at it, that okay, now I'm just trying to wrap my mind around. Okay, I'm diving now, so what am I going to do? I'm going to now go through that little space to see what's on the other side, and I don't know what's on the other side. And if I get stuck, I'm screwed then. How do you mentally that free? I'm not claustrophobic as a general rule, but I'm just trying to understand, how do you mentally decide it's a good idea and then do it and stay calm doing it?
So there's quite a funny story with that, because I know which sequence you're talking about. It's a restriction that's about the size of squeezing underneath your bed. So literally your shoulders are pinned.
No, man.
And the floor, your belly's scraping along the floor, but it's actually like it's a heavy granule sand, but it's in an extremely high flow. Like, it is flowing so hard, it's the equivalent of, walking against a hurricane force wind. So you're trying to pull yourself through this space, and you're actually moving the sand. You're digging your way into a cave, basically. So we wanted to film this location because it's epically mind-blowing looking, right? So we knew this would play really, really well on TV, as obviously it left an impact on you, right? So my colleague Wes Skiles and I thought, okay, yeah, we're going to try and get into this flow that's so high we don't even know if it's physically possible. So let's plan how we're going to do this. And so we planned a lot of extra redundancy with our equipment, and we thought, okay, well, our other dive partner, we had 2 more people with us, so 4 of us were going to go through this space, and 2 other people were going to be lighting. So we thought, okay, the guy with the least amount of equipment should try to get in first. None of us knew whether we could physically even get through this high flow. So
again, that's the point. That's the point. I go like, hang on. Let's sip Mai Tais on this island wherever we are. Let's just stay there. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, we get down there and we're being sandblasted by the material that's blowing in the current in our faces. And we know that that's just embedding in all of our clips and our gear. And we expected to lose equipment on this dive. So we thought, let's let Mark go first. So Mark tries and he's pulling and I can tell he's using every fiber of his physical ability and he can't get in. And he turns around and he comes back and he faces the camera and he says, no way. And then my partner Wes is like, oh, try again, you know? So he tries again. He comes back out. This time his eyes are much bigger. He's like, no way. Like he looks scared. So Wes is like, I'm going to go through. So Wes passes me this giant HD camera. It's 80 pounds. It's huge. It's, you know, it's big as a set of double tanks and it's heavy. And he gets me to hold it and he just bullies his way through with everything he's got. And he gets through. But in the process of getting through and popping into the next room, he thought, this is really a bad idea. This is really dangerous. We shouldn't be doing this. So he turns around and he's going to come right back out. But none of us know this. So now he's facing me from the other side of this like ferocious flowing current. And I'm thinking, oh, he's ready for the camera. So I start pushing and pushing and pushing with everything I've got to push the camera into his hands. And then I was going to follow through. So I'm pushing the camera and he's on the other side, apparently going, no. And pushing back. And I'm thinking, damn, this flow is strong. You know? So I pushed harder and harder until boom, he has the camera. And now he's like, oh man, I guess we have to shoot this now. So now he's got the camera, and that's when he's starting to film the footage that you saw online.
Wow.
So I got in, and it was so funny because apparently his thought was, okay, if Jill gets through, no self-respecting male cave diver is going to stay on the other side of that restriction. If she gets through, the team's in, right?
Play the ego. Yeah, the ego card. Yeah, go.
So I got in, and then the other two guys copied what I did, and we were all in. And then 500 feet inside the cave, I was wearing a full face mask, which makes it extra difficult, but it was so we could record the audio for the film. So we get 500 feet inside beyond that restriction when the O-ring connecting the feed hose to my full face mask blows, and it's like just spewing gas. And we tried to fix it underwater to no avail. And my Wes is now going, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. And I'm like, no, you film this. Like, God damn it, we got through all of this. Film it. You know? So I was like feathering my tank on and off for a while to feed the full face mask, and then I decided to ditch the mask and just switch to a second stage and another regulator so that I wouldn't waste so much gas. And then we got out of the cave. But on the way out, Mark, the first guy that went in, on the way out, now the flow is like pushing us out. On the way out, he goes out first. He gets stuck part way out because he lodges on the ceiling, and then all of a sudden his body goes through and parts of his dive gear are all left behind. They've been literally ripped off of his body, including like the feed to his wing and everything. So he literally shredded his gear getting out through this birth canal.
Jill, we've got a question here from Angus Morton. Have you ever lost a guideline? And I assume, what's the game plan if you do?
Yeah, so that's something that we train everybody in at the very entry level of cave diving to find a lost guideline, because it can happen. And yeah, I have in a similar very small cave when I took a scientist in to do some sampling. We had probably one of my closest calls where she was following me in again in a very small cave. And when she turned around, first she panicked and got entangled in the guideline, and then broke the guideline. And so I had to patch, but I had to find the guideline in zero visibility because she'd trashed up the cave. So yeah, but you know, that's why I say to people, it's all about what you do on the surface before the dive, because before the dive, I go through my mind, what's the worst case scenario? What could happen? Oh, my dive buddy could get stuck and become the cork in the bottle that's containing my life. We could lose a guideline. We could break a guideline. We could have a life support emergency. We could get separated. Those are all things that I'll rehearse right before the dive. And those are all things you learn how to deal with in an entry-level cave diving class. And you don't expect all of them to happen on one dive, which is what happened on that dive. But then when the emergency strikes and your heart starts to race and the squirrels start running around in your head, you just say to yourself, sorry, but emotions, there's no room for you right now. I've got to just be pragmatic, and I've got to just do the things that I learned to do in that cave diving class, one at a time. And that's the best thing that I can do to survive right here. So getting all panicked about it won't help.
How do you find the lost guideline? In a nutshell, how do you find it? What's the you say there's a technique.
Yeah. So as soon as you realize that you're separated from the guideline, you stop. You take that deep breath, clear your head of the emotions, try and slow down your breathing, because, your life depends on air conservation right now. And then you sort of mentally take stock of, when did I last have the guideline? Where did I last see it? What side of my body was it on? Can I visualize the cave? Like, because we're assuming that you have no visibility now. And then once you've taken that moment to try and figure out, where you were, then you feel around in the darkness to something that you can tie your line to. And in a cave like the one that I was in, there was nothing. There were no rocks to tie off to. It was all clay, mud, and crap. So in that case, what I did is I took the wrist slate off of my arm and I tied the end of my guideline to that, and I jammed it into the silt like an anchor. So that created a tie-off, basically. And then you just create a very strategic search. Like you move along the floor and, feel your way along in a linear pattern. And you actually, if it's a big cave, you might try to loop up the wall, across the ceiling and down to see if you've caught the guideline, basically. And then you, if you didn't, and you're back to your tie off again at the beginning, you pick another direction, 90 degrees, and keep working at it. And you do that in your cave diving class. And some people will find the guideline in 2 minutes, 7 minutes. I've had people take 45 minutes to find the guideline, but that was enough because we had enough gas supply. And that's another one of those golden rules where we only use 1/3 of our gas supply to go in at the maximum. So when we turn around, we have enough to get ourselves home and our dive partner home in the worst case scenario.
No, it's crazy.
Grops, you had questions and I interrupted you.
No. So my two biggest questions, I understand with normal recreational diving, we've got a secondary regulator that we can use in an emergency for ourselves or for a dive buddy. Mm-hmm. But I suppose you guys probably have to have a bit more. Like the volume of equipment is probably 3 or 4 times what a recreational diver would carry.
Yeah, so we always have appropriate redundancy, and we consider everything like sort of triply redundant. So I won't just have one light; I have 3. So I'll always have more than enough backup gear when something goes wrong, and so everything's really planned with that level of redundancy. So dives can be as simple as just a side mount technical diving rig with 2 tanks, always with at least 2 gas supplies, and as complicated as a rebreather with another. I've had as much as 300 kilos of equipment on for a dive.
They have to drag that with you. But then that's the other thing, the equipment, your buoyancy control, especially in those confined areas, that must be, you must be on top of that game. Mm-hmm. I assume, because when you get disorientated, you can quickly pop or sink, and that's when the real problems start.
Yeah, it's buoyancy and trim. So it's also about like how well stowed and organized your gear is, so you're really streamlined and you don't have points that will snag with things. And then always in an emergency, we always train our students that, okay, stop, take that deep breath, establish your buoyancy, and then, take action so you don't make the situation worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jill, when I was doing kind of the research, one thing that I've picked up on more than one occasion, some of the videos and stuff that I've read, is that, so I know nothing about normal scuba. I've only spearfished, and so, but I understand that if you compare the equipment that you use compared to normal scuba, there's quite some significant differences in. I understand it's different fins, there's different techniques, there's a lot of stuff that's simply not the same because it won't work in a cave setup. How does, just run us through some of that?
Yeah, so I mean, everything from fins, it's really important to have the right buoyancy and trim in your fins, since they're very much at the end of your lever of your body, so that they need to be able to be light enough so that you can bend your knees and have your feet up off the ground and do really small, fin kicks.
Maneuvers,
Yeah, and then we use spring straps as opposed to any sort of rubber straps, because we don't want to ever break a fin strap and be without one when we're 2 miles back in a cave. But right down to life support. I mean, a lot of my dives I use rebreathers. All of my deep dives are rebreather dives. Again, for redundancy, because we still have enough bailout equipment that we could completely come home on open circuit, even if the rebreather failed, if we're not carrying 2 rebreathers. Yeah. So everything is subtle. The changes to the gear are subtle but important.
So at that trip with the 300 kilograms of equipment, how long or how far was that dive?
So that would have been on the Wakulla project back in the late 1990s, where we made the first ever accurate three-dimensional map of any cave, anywhere, dry or wet. But this cave was 90 meters deep, and we were doing saturation level exposures. So I was doing 5 hours of bottom time swimming into the cave at 90 meters deep. But that meant that I had to do 17 hours of decompression in order to get back to the surface. And so I was carrying a mapper, dragging an extra scooter, wearing a couple rebreathers or one rebreather and a bunch of extra tanks, scientific diving package, big lights, cameras, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And has it improved in the last couple of years? Would you say technology has made it a bit easier and safer in the last, say, 20 odd years or 20 or 30 odd years?
Yeah, a lot of the technology has become more reliable, because a lot of the things that I used for expeditions like that were, very much, first time use or even in development, like we were guinea pig testers. So I think the reliability has improved. I think access to that kind of equipment has increased exponentially. So there's a lot of people using rebreathers and getting long range scooters and things now. But, you still have to carry the stuff. Like, I'll tell people, don't get into rebreather diving if you think you're going to just be able to carry less stuff on your deep dives, because you still have to carry enough bailout to get yourself home.
I just want to once again, one of those things, you're the taste rabbit for equipment that's used in one of the most perilous occupations that I can possibly think of. Once again, how do you kind of go to bed at night with peace in your heart, knowing that this guy that designed this thing is probably not using it himself, but I need to go and test this tomorrow morning, and I might die while testing it. It's just,
well, I've had a lot of weird things happen, things that I certainly didn't expect. I mean, I remember I was down 300 feet deep inside a cave, and I had been told to test how long these particular rebreather batteries would last, and the developer of the equipment said, yeah, just push them a bit, like we've been speccing them out for 40 hours of use before you have to swap them out, but maybe we can get a little bit further, so why don't you push that a little bit. Well, nobody informed me at the time that the results of pushing lithium batteries beyond their sort of cutoff point could have been lethal. And sure enough,
a chemical explosion.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened. I was down in a cave 300 feet deep when a battery, a lithium battery, exploded inside my rebreather and
Yeah.
blew a hole at the back of it. So, yeah, I never expected that one. Who would have thought that a fire and explosion underwater could take you out?
It's like I'm gonna repeat it so many times. The mere fact that that has happened to you and you got back into the water after that, you are tougher than I am. You are, and I'm tough. I can take a lot, but yes, no, that's but that's the crazy part. I suppose also you do a lot of your testing of equipment at probably not as hectic depths or big dives and whatnot, and you sort of lead into them and then see their limitations and whatnot. It must, but your equipment knowledge and your technical knowledge must be very high to actually just think about doing these types of dives.
Well, I think that's part of what's driven a lot of my exploration is I love gear. I love tinkering with gear. I love when somebody says, well, I don't know how we're going to do this, but this is what we'd like to do. So I love being that problem solver in that regard. But whether you're 300 feet deep or whether you're 6 feet deep, rebreathers or scuba gear can kill you. And some of the stupidest things I've done have been in 6 feet of water. So
yeah.
and it goes, through my head afterwards, like, man, that would have been such an embarrassing way to die, right?
If that happened, yeah.
Jill, so when so you're on the dive, and I would assume, obviously, you go through the planning process, and you've got everything down to a T. But what are kind of the absolute red flags, red lights, where you will look at this and say, no?
Oh yeah,
no, we're not doing this. And when would you and also the opposite? Do you get to a point everyone's in, screw it, we're just going to do it now, and we know there's risks, but we'll roll the dice. It's kind of a double question.
Yeah, no, I'm like incredibly diligent about safety protocols, and I think the decisions that you make about go or no go have to be set in stone, and they have to be set in stone like for the passion of the moment. Because I've had to be able to travel like halfway around the world and spend hundreds and thousands of dollars, on a project or a film or something, and then get to the water's edge or even into the water and then go, oof, no, not now, not today, not ever. And I think that that's the wisdom of the surviving explorers. I think that's what those more than 100 people that I know that have passed would tell you if they could today, because more than 90% of those accidents, I can look back and say, gosh, they could have prevented this by a decision made before the dive. Yeah. So I think you have to be incredibly vigilant with those protocols. And I've turned down projects that I would give my eye teeth to participate in, but didn't feel right about the team or the gear or the protocols. And I have, like I say, traveled around the world to the most remote place and then either aborted or skipped a dive because of gear issues. Yeah.
What are the indicators?
Well, for rebreathers and for dive prep, we have checklists that we go through step by step. So you're doing everything from calibrating oxygen sensors to positive and negative pressure checks to ensure that you don't have any leaks, to packing a scrubber material for the rebreather, and you walk through the checklist. And after you've done that all, you do a little pre-breathe run through to make sure that it's absolutely working properly. And so if it passes all those checks, then you can enter your dive feeling confident about the gear. It doesn't mean that something won't break during the dive, but it means that you at least got in the water with everything that's fully functional, with all the bells and whistles and alarms working. 90% of people that die on rebreathers actually did not follow that simple protocol. So they got in the water with something that failed in that checklist, or they didn't do the checklist. We don't find dead guys with checklists, frankly. So they got in the water with 2 out of 3 sensors working and went, 2 out of 3 is fine, and I can just run this thing manually. But I don't get into the water with broken equipment or a broken team. I only get in the water when everything's A1.
It's anecdotal experience that I've and I'm definitely not on your par or your level, but from my experience, normally when accidents happen, it's not one thing that goes wrong. It's normally a couple of things that go wrong. So, like you said, if there's one element that's already out of whack, just add a second or a third or something else, and it could not even be related, but it could just, it's like a stack of dominoes, and then it goes. That's crazy.
Yeah, and when you do the accident analysis afterwards and look at it, you go, oh my gosh, but he was such a good guy. Why do you make that stupid decision? Why did he do that today? And because you're able to do that accident analysis, that can be kind of a wake-up call, like, gosh, I never thought that he would have done this, but he did. So obviously I can make mistakes too, and I have to acknowledge my mortality, my humanity. We make mistakes. We get swept up in the moment. Yeah.
But what you say is so true. For a number of years, I was on what we call the South African National Sea Rescue Institute. It's basically the South African equivalent of the Coast Guard, for all the rescue element of the US Coast Guard.
Just much smaller. Yeah, much smaller.
Yeah, much smaller. And so they run most of the maritime rescue operation stuff in South Africa, and I was on a rescue crew for a number of years. The reason why I say that, if I think back, how many times did we go on call-outs where, looking back, I think, you moron, how did you go and do what you did out at sea and think this is a good idea? And Darwin Awards are a thing, and how much life or loss of life could have been prevented by people not being idiots. Stupid things like life jackets, cell phone on you, just basic, like you say, checklist. Don't get in the water with broken equipment. I mean, one would think that's pretty obvious. Apparently, for some people, it's not.
Yeah, no.
Jill, we've got some questions. First one is, how big is a team, and what would it comprise of? The professions that you would, let's call it a fairly big operation that you want to go do. How is that team built?
So it depends. Like a lot of what I do, especially these days, is all solo. And I've had as many people as 18 people in a cave at the same time on an operation I was in charge of for a film, right? So you have everyone from camera operators to lighting people to people in front of the camera to safety divers to people wrangling the, cables and things inside the cave. So it varies. An ideal cave diving team is 3 for redundancy. So we have 3-man teams as the ideal. If you ever have 4 people that want to cave dive together, you tend to break them into 2 teams of 2. It's easier to keep track of. But for expeditions, like when we did that big project where I did the 22-hour dive, we had 150 people volunteer. Some of us were kind of preparing for 2 years. We were in the field for 3 months, and people would come for a day at a time or a week at a time. And we had everyone from chamber operators and dive doctors to people who were just willing to come cook and safety divers. All manner.
So it varies.
Yeah.
No, it's I could think the setup, the planning that goes ahead, and how that team is made or comprised of it. That must be a logistical nightmare. Another question, and I think David Kutsia is asking. You said you changed from rebreather to open circuit when you returned to the surface. I assume that would be in an emergency situation only.
Oh yeah, if the rebreather fails, then we would bail to open circuit gas that we carry with us. And my philosophy about bailout gas is to always be self-sufficient so that I could get myself all the way back to the surface with the completely failed rebreather.
One thing that I'm very curious about, and there's having done some ocean sports and stuff before, it was always in the back of my mind that, or the way we do it, when we sometimes paddle offshore, there's always in the back of my mind that if it goes wrong here, there's measures in place and guys in red boats that will come and help me. If I just need to suck it up for an hour, and in all likelihood, kind of just you'll be okay. In your game, there's only 100 people in the world that can do what you do, of which you're the guy that you would send to save you. How do you? Now you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
What is the kind of? Can they get help to you in those kind of situations? Is your help diving?
Is it a recovery operation?
Or is it just like
it's a recovery operation?
Very, very few cave rescues in history, and that's actually a bit of a funny story. And it's a phrase that we come back to time and time again. So 4 of my colleagues were exploring a cave called Bluebird, and they had to go through a very, very small winding space, but then they popped up into dry cave. And so sump diving is what we call this, where you dive and cave in dry spaces. But once you're beyond the sump, you might as well be on the backside of the moon, right? So these guys, the other end of the guideline, they could not find their way out. So they retreated back to the dry space to meet the other two guys and said, we don't have any gas left and we can't find our way out. And then they're like, we should just wait for rescue. And then Wes, my colleagues, just laughed, and he's like, the best people to save us are already in the cave. There's no rescue. Either we get out or we die here together, and it's not going to be pretty. So as it turned out, Wes went searching for the guideline and literally, found it kind of on his last breaths. But he was like,
how do you mentally deal with knowing that there's no safety net? If it goes, is there anything that scares you in that sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
every dive scares me.
That's good.
But how do you mentally work through that?
Yeah.
Actually, I think I've got a better question in line with that.
Yeah.
I understand the concept of flow, and I'm sure you must have heard about it, or you must be experiencing it a lot, where it's so dangerous and you're so focused and you can do it, that you get into a state of flow where stuff that takes very long doesn't feel that long, or stuff that goes fast all of a sudden slows down. Do you experience that in terms of your diving, where it feels like it should feel like a marathon 10-hour dive, but it went past like a couple of minutes, and you feel refreshed and energized and crazy like that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because of what I do as a filmmaker. I almost always have a camera in my hand when I'm underwater. So imagine I've got this weird combination of right brain and left brain activities going on. Like, in order to be creative and bring back the best images or film that's needed for a project, I'm completely in a creative mindset, and you lose track of time easily. Like when you're doing something creative, even, you sit down at the computer and 8 hours can go by, right? But I'm operating life support equipment that requires constant monitoring. And so I have to set off these little alarm bells in my head to remind me of the space and time. Like every couple of minutes, what's my PO2? Or, okay, navigation, let me recheck with my navigation. So I have to kind of break away from the creative to check back in with those things that are dealt with the pragmatic side of my left brain, But yeah, it's just this little alarm clock that's constantly reminding me, check your life support, check your navigation.
So time must fly. Time is pretty much flying, because you've got so much items to focus on. Yeah, and there's a lot of software happening, software decisions happening.
Yeah. And you're incredibly focused and engaged.
Jill, we've got an interesting question here. What is the procedure to follow for a lost body in cave diving?
So for that horrible day out when I was in the cave with the scientist who was trapped and tangled and then broke the guideline, right? So we've got zero visibility. She's stuck. So I managed to unwedge her, but now I've got a broken guideline and I've got to patch it. I've got to find the other end of the guideline. And in the process of doing that, I had to let go of my partner and just focus on that. And so I did. I patched into the guideline, put a marker, and then I lost track of her. So now it's like, oh, crap. Like now we've got a guideline, but where's my buddy? And for a moment, my brain is exploding with thoughts, and it's like, oh man, 2 women can't die in a cave here today. This is going to be world news if that happens, and I want to get home. So every fiber of your body just wants to bolt for the entrance of the cave and get it all over with. But I realized at that point I had to go to all measures to ensure that I was not leaving her behind. So in cave diving, we go to the last place that we had contact with that buddy and then initiate a search. So when you have no visibility, that means I went further into the cave until I could find clear water. Because once I found clear water, I know that she hasn't been there. So as long as there's no visibility, there's a possibility that she's there, right? So a lot of people make that mistake through inexperience. Like when they're lost, they swim and they find clear water and they're like, yay! It's like, no. The clear water is not where you came from. The crappy water is where you came from. So I went further into the cave to make sure that I wasn't leaving her behind, found clear water, and then methodically felt my way out of the cave. She had actually bolted for the surface and called out an emergency. So there were people on their way. My friends had, got the emergency call and were filling tanks, and they were rushing to the cave in the hopes that there could be a rescue and not a body recovery. But I was in the cave an extra 73 minutes. So in essence, I was dead to my friends for 73 minutes. Yeah, but so I just methodically worked my way out of the cave, just checking all the boxes that I wasn't leaving her behind, knowing that I had one chance to get it right. And fortunately, when I got to the entrance, she was there.
Yeah.
So now I want to throw another curveball into the question. So I was in my research. You told a story, and this is it astounded me. You were diving inside an iceberg. Mm-hmm. Do I understand?
Yeah.
Now I can think to myself, okay, you're cave diving, it's the Bahamas, pina coladas, coconuts on the beach, water is like a warm, Nemo fishies. Now it's the Arctic, it's stupid cold, just the cold alone will kill you. Mm-hmm. How does the whole setup change now in this environment? What still applies and what doesn't apply anymore? Because now everything's on its head.
Yeah, so this was 20 years ago now, but I pitched to National Geographic to be the first people to cave dive inside an iceberg. It had never been done before. So there's no books to read.
I'm going to interrupt you. Sorry. I need to interrupt you. Was there alcohol involved in that decision-making process?
No. The funny thing is, like, my partner and I wanted to go to Antarctica in the worst way, and we wanted to pitch a project to National Geographic. And so we were going to follow in Shackleton's footsteps and make a journey from New Zealand to Antarctica. It's a 12-day sea crossing in the worst season on the planet. And we were going to go to where Shackleton had a base camp on the Ross Ice Shelf. Well, really literally about the night before our pitch meeting, the largest iceberg in recorded history calved away from the Ross Ice Shelf in that location. It was the size of Jamaica, an island of ice, and it was the largest moving object on the planet. And so the night before our pitch, it's like, oh my God, that's the project. We'll tell them that we're going to go cave dive inside this iceberg. And so they're like, what? There are caves inside of icebergs? And we're like, hell yeah, there are caves inside of icebergs, which was a complete hypothesis. We had no clue, right?
I'm wondering what the people at National Geographic go. Hang on, Jill's coming to pitch us another idea of hers, and everybody's like, "Come on, it's my turn. I want to listen what she's going to come up with."
Well, they were
I think they've got a betting pool if you'll die or not.
Well, unfortunately, some of them probably do. But after the pitch, Emery Christoph turns to Wes and says, "That is the biggest crock of shit that I've ever heard in my life." And 30 days into the project down in Antarctica, after we'd made this like unbelievable sea crossing, 20-meter seas, the boat icing over and almost like capsizing because of the weight of the ice. Then we got stuck in the ice. I mean, it was hell just getting there. But then when we get there and we finally, after 30 days, find what I consider to be a worthy cave system. Then, it's a whole new environment. It's like going to the moon. You have no idea. And the iceberg was calving. There were these ferocious currents. We were trapped inside the iceberg. We got swept through one iceberg, and then on the other side, when we finally surfaced, I could not see the boat, which is a big problem in Antarctica. Right? Yeah, it was crazy.
People underestimate. Sorry, man. People underestimate. I've had normal recreational dives that had swell, and I've had normal recreational dives that had a very fast current, and people get lost, almost drowned, injured badly. I think the moon would have been a safer place because people knew how to get there and know what to do when they were there. Like, you were literally in such uncharted territory. You're nuts.
Well, when we were trapped inside the iceberg from the flow, Wes, who had been in that cave incident with the best people to save us are already in the cave.
Oh, yeah?
He said that was going through his head over and over again. It's like, there is no rescue here.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody has the equipment or the background. Like, we'll never be recovered.
I've made peace with it. I'm a slight adrenaline junkie. So a lot of the things I do, the skydiving, the scuba diving, like the initial part, especially the learning the new stuff, the stuff and the equipment is great. And then you go do it a couple of times and it's a thrill. Do you think you've got a little bit of adrenaline junkie in you? And I'm sure you must, because if you're still afraid and you still get scared, you must still get that thrill of something new or dangerous.
I think it's a bit different for me. I don't think of myself as an adrenaline junkie. Like, I was once gifted with a skydiving class. So it was a tip from a cave diving student, which was unbelievably generous. But they signed me up for a one-on-one skydiving class, and it wasn't one of these ones where you're tethered to the instructor. It was the full ball of wax, and the person included a photographer that would skydive with us and take my picture, so I could have that whole experience. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I'm not afraid of heights. I would absolutely love the whole flight experience. I mean, that's incredibly appealing to me. And I watch skydiving. I'm like, man, that looks like fun. But it was the landing that I was scared of. And I'm like, I could twist my ankle and I won't be able to dive. So to me, after I did the whole assessment, I went, nah, this isn't an acceptable risk. This could interrupt or end my career. Right? So I never did it. So I don't think it's the adrenaline so much that fuels me. I actually equate it to something that I write about in my book, which is a gene. So I think my DNA prepares me for what I do today. There's this gene called the 7R gene that 15% of people have that means you're an adventure seeker. Not necessarily an adrenaline junkie, but someone who likes the adventure of new experiences, new flavors, new tastes, new places, travel. If you drive someplace, you try and drive a different route, so you can see something new rather than the same.
It's almost like wanderlust.
Yeah, it is. It is really, and it's probably like a genetic component that was part of the hunter-gatherers rather than the people that built the farms and tended the fields. And so I think I probably have a pretty strong 7R gene that keeps me curious, keeps me seeking out these new sensations. And that's the thrill that I get. So it's like I'm scared before the dive, but I deal with all of that fear before I get in the water by doing those mental exercises. So when I get in the water, it's zen. It's very, very much a zen-like experience.
I suppose also selling your business and moving to the Cayman Islands, that must have been it's big decisions, but it's like that's almost it's almost a no-brainer when you're saying if your truth is your zen is in the water, you have to do anything and everything, take a risk to actually get there.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, I made the most money in my life in my early 20s with my advertising business in Toronto, but I soon learned I didn't want to work indoors. I couldn't survive in an enclosed space. I need to be out learning and doing things. And it was worth selling everything and giving up a successful business to find my true passion and do what I do today.
Jill, I want to get back to diving the iceberg real quick. So I was watching the video that you made that was on YouTube about the iceberg. And one thing that kind of, and it was all cool and nice and whatnot. And the next moment, the video ended with you saying the iceberg broke apart just as you got out.
It did. So, yeah.
Just run us through that.
Yeah. So the last dive we did in this particular Ice Island cave number 4, we were off getting footage for the movie Ice Island that we made and National Geographic story that was written. And we're inside the iceberg, and there's a lot of things that are going wrong. I have a hole in my dry gloves, so I've got ice water literally in my glove now. I can't feel my hand. And when we decide to turn around to get out of this iceberg, the flow had strengthened so quickly that we could not pull ourselves forward. And we ended up turning a 1-hour dive into a 3-hour fight for our lives to use every bit of our physical energy to pull ourselves out of this iceberg. But after the dive, we got out, and I remember saying to the chief scientist, the cave tried to keep us today. And yet we sat down to have dinner and prepped our gear, and we said, we want to do one more dive. So we posted a watch on the boat and said, listen, watch. It's so hard to figure out the tides here. And in South Africa, it's critically important to dive the tides, right? So we had someone on watch to let us know when slack happened. And when the slack tide happened, we were going to jump right back in and do another quick half hour to get the last bit of the footage that we felt like we needed. And as we're sitting down to our dinner, we heard the scream up on top of the deck, and we ran up topside, and before our eyes, all of the iceberg that we had just been inside of, the cave that we'd just been inside of, started to break and calve and shear away. And the whole thing, in a matter of minutes, just broke into slush as far as the eye could see on the surface of the ocean. So the cave was gone. Nobody else would ever explore that cave.
No, no, that.
No. Well, at that point, I turned to the science officer and I'm like, it's time for us to go home. That was it.
That's a sign.
Done.
When I was thinking about tonight's show in the week, and I'm thinking, kind of, your day job is made up of the most popular phobias that I can think of.
Yeah.
The drowning, dark, closed spaces.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking that being eaten alive because there's still sharks. And then the only thing left was, okay, you can't die from burning to death. Then you just told me your batteries exploded. So that idea of mine was gone.
I've had 3 fires. Only one inside my equipment while I was diving, but I've had 2 other battery explosions in the course of my diving career, both from early batteries. Yeah. So yeah, I'm terrified of fire. I'm terrified of batteries. Lithium. Oof.
What still scares you?
What scares me?
If you tell me something like spiders, I'm just not gonna burst out laughing. Sorry.
Driving. Things I can't control. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not I'm not thrilled of driving.
I'm sorry. You're an enigma.
Yeah.
What does your husband think of what you do? Has he given up?
Insane. He thinks I'm absolutely insane. Fortunately, we met when I was already doing this, so he's kind of stuck with us.
There was no false advertising, yeah.
Yeah, there are times like after that incident with being dead to my friends for 73 minutes. Obviously, there was a little bit of reckoning at home. After that, I mean, my friends that had been rushing to the site expecting to recover my body wrote letters to me, things they would have read in my eulogy. That's a pretty eye-opening experience, and it was devastating for my husband, who already has PTSD from his time in the military. He's like, how long do you have to do this? Haven't you done enough? When do we get to quit? Like, what is going on? When are you going to give me 3 months of your time? And and so I did. I mean, I took the summer off that year. It was the longest time I'd ever been out of the water. And he's like, what can we do together that's, our own special expedition? Like, what have you always wanted to do that didn't involve the risk of diving? And so I told him, I'm like, well, I always wanted to ride my bicycle across Canada. And he's like, does it have to be so hard? But we did. We set off on a 7,000-kilometer bike ride that summer to clear ourselves of the trauma of that dive. And then he was like, okay, get back to diving. I'm done. I need to rest.
It's almost like a scene out of Forrest Gump. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, about 2 days into the bike ride, like through the Rocky Mountains, he's looking at me and he's going, "This just isn't fun." I'm like, yeah, we got to finish now.
So I can relate totally with that. Mine's definitely not on your scale because I had to retire from rugby. I was getting old and I had a family. And at one point in time, I retired. And about 2.5 months into my retirement, my wife said, "Just please go to the rugby club.
Please go.
You're a grumpy old bear. Go get your dopamine and your endorphins and everything. Just go, because you're not a happy."
Yeah.
I can imagine. Really, I'm relating to it, but it's definitely not on your level. Your technical level and what you've put into this. I'm sure if you stop doing this for a protracted period of time, you will be very unhappy. It's crazy. It's crazy, but it's something. I'm very jealous and I look up to what you've done, and it's crazy. It's amazing.
Well, I realized I hit the jackpot. I didn't get it right the first time. This is my second husband. Robert is my second husband. But I absolutely hit the jackpot. Like, he recognizes that what I do is what makes me who I am. He might not understand it. He might not like it. He'll never participate in it. It terrifies him. But it is part of the fundamentals that made the woman that he's in love with. And so he realizes that you can't keep a butterfly in a jar. You've got to let the butterfly fly free, even though the worst could potentially happen one day. If you want to have that full and real experience as a couple, then you've got to let that person do what they love.
It's amazing. And talking about the future, I assume you still fit enough and you can, like Rowan's not as old as I am. I'm a couple years his senior. And I'm starting to understand the concept of you needing to balance and slow down physically. We do a lot of I've done a lot of contact sports, and we do some martial arts, and there's a definite position right now where I'm going, hang on, my son's 15, so I'm pushing him. And until recently, I was able to outlast him and be stronger and fitter. But now, all of a sudden, I'm starting to understand there's limitations in terms of my age and what I need to do. Are there any plans of you slowing down is there maybe a cutoff point? You say, okay, hang on, now I need to transfer my knowledge to other people, to the next generation, or something like that?
Yeah, well, I always think that's incredibly important is mentoring others, so that they can, fill and exceed anything that you've done in your own lives. That's always been an important focus to me. And I guess I work smarter now than when I was younger. I mean, I've definitely done a number on my back and have to be very careful about all the heavy loads and take more hikes with less weight and get into the water carefully. But no, I'm 55 and I'm not slowing down diving. I'm maybe wiser about the things that I do take on.
Pick your battles better.
Yeah. And I've never wanted to be a crazy deep diver, and I have done some crazy deep dives, but it's always got to have there has to be a purpose to the risk. It's not just for the sake of a record,
the accolades,
whatever. So yeah,
Jill?
I like to dive with meaning.
One thing that we talk about on the show always, is a big component of what we talk about, is fitness and preparedness, physical preparedness and whatnot. But your game is completely different in your application of physical fitness. Or what do you do to kind of what that is relevant in your space? What kind of, because I would assume things like jogging, not all that relevant, but probably how do you stay fit for what you do physically and mentally?
Yeah. Well, in terms of physically, I'm not someone who likes working out in a gym or anything like that. I just like outdoor experiences. So I hike, I ride my bike, I paddle, I swim. I just stay, really active with outdoor sports. And then, mentally, it's just as important. And that's not just, the readiness to take on fear. Mentally also means staying proficient and current. So, I mean, this COVID time is an important example, really, where I have not been as active as I usually am, and so I have to go back to the baby dives. And so the dives that I've been doing recently have all been super shallow and extra redundancy, with the understanding that I need to refamiliarize myself with my skills and my gear and just get back into it slowly. Because I'm accustomed to doing hundreds of dives a year. I've got 8,000 dives, logged in my career, and but now
8,000. 8,000.
Yeah.
I'm people ask me no, what do you do? No, I've scuba dived. Have you done it? Yeah, lots. It's about 90 times.
Yeah.
8,000 times.
But I mean, in the last 4 months, I've got 10 dives, right? So it's this is definitely back to ground zero. So before I be doing any, big stuff, I've got to get back into it.
I suppose there's a workup period as well. One of our previous guests, martial artist as well, he's a big proponent of, if you want to be fit in what you do, you need to do that. So for you to be dive fit, you just need to dive a lot.
Yeah, you do. So, and simulations and rehearsals, practice. I mean, I go back to ground zero and I practice the things that I teach a cave diving student or a rebreather student. I literally go back to those fundamental skills and rehearse.
Yeah, we see that with the professionals that we talk to. It's time and time again. They talk about the fundamentals of whatever you do. It makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because your mind gets rusty, but so do your motor skills, and both of those are equally as important. Yeah.
How do you mentally? It's a very high stress game that you're in. Mm-hmm. Have you ever found that kind of how to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. I'm not talking about in the dive, but kind of working with, for example, something like a sports psychiatrist or something to kind of work you through that. Is there something that you use in that sense to kind of help you deal with that pressure, visualization, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I haven't had any professional support in that regard. I think that's a really valuable resource, though. I probably would love that because the cumulative PTSD of losing friends is at times crippling, really. You have to sort of find that meaning and think about why they were doing it and doing what they love, I guess. But still, that does weigh heavily on your mind. It makes me retreat quite a bit, and do more solo stuff than team stuff, because to me that's less stressful. I'm only responsible for myself. I get the most stress probably from being in a project-oriented thing and worrying about my colleagues more than anything.
Have you had a personal moment? And I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask it for the guests. In a dive where there was almost on your side a resolute acceptance of, okay, this is it. It's done. I need to kind of make peace with this is where it ends today. If you're willing to share that,
yeah. So that dive when I was in with the trapped scientist and broken line and everything else, I literally thought that there was a good chance that two of us were going to die that day and not come home. And for a moment, when, like I say, those squirrels are running around in your head, just, or chattering monkeys is another way I refer to it. I remember in my mind going, I have to get home. Robert doesn't know how to do the taxes. But I also always, in that moment, I say, all right, emotions, you won't serve me well. Get the hell out of the way, because I can't see the exit of the cave right now. I don't know how we're going to solve this problem. It's too big. It's way too big. So all I can do is the next best step, and I can keep taking the next best step. Like, what do I do next? What do I do next? And not worry about what happens an hour from now or a day from now or whatever else. I won't be that person that spent their last moments writing a note to their loved ones on a slate. I will be fighting my ass off to get to the exit of the cave until the very last breath. And so I think that's the resolution that you have to have in your mind. You have to know that you would fight to the very end.
To add to that question, and now we're entering, it's kind of a rabbit hole in what I'm asking now, but now my English, physiologically, what would happen in a case like that? I mean, okay, you're stuck in the cave, right? It's now, there's no exit now. I'm stuck, and it's what it is. Resources are running out. Physiologically, what would happen to you? You just won't magically stop breathing. So would you just kind of fade away and what would happen from a bit?
It's pretty good.
That's the question he's ever asked anybody.
But I mean, because the reason why I asked that, it's not like if you're a skydiver, you jump and it goes wrong and it's splat and it's over. There's some thinking time and realization that I screwed up. It's not quick and nasty and done. But what would happen? It just kind of.
Yeah. So, the first thing that happens, obviously, is that your respirations go up, your heartbeat goes up because you're scared, right? Interestingly, on that particular dive, when I managed to take that deep breath and calm down, the net result of my extra 73 minutes in the cave over my diving partner, I did the gas calculations, and it turns out that I used about half of my normal breathing rate. So I managed to get myself into such a Zen focus. And another thing that happened on that dive is that after digging her out, one of my 2 side mount regulators was completely clogged with clay and it was free flowing. So the only way to breathe from that regulator was to turn the tank on, take a breath, and turn it off. Turn the tank on, take a breath, turn it off.
Feather it on and off. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think that action of feathering it on and off really got me into a pace. Like, I think that was actually very helpful and very slow breathing.
Very efficient. Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, if you run out of gas, you're going to run out of something to breathe. You're eventually going to
Blackout
have a lung full of water.
and drown. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm still saying it.
No.
It's your. I think your preparation, but I think it's the same with this COVID problem that's carrying on. It's risks, and life is full of risk, and we try and manage and negate as much of the risk as possible. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not easy. It's as simple as that, but it's not easy, especially in your case.
Yeah, everything's a exercise of risk and reward, and is it worth it? Yeah.
So what's next? What's the next big? Are you gonna find a massive cave below Lake Zambia?
Oh boy, everything's so uncertain right now. Frankly, all of my work projects for the entire year have been canceled, so I've missed out on projects in the Philippines and Australia and all over the world. And I'm just rapidly trying to develop new ideas and new projects that can take place. But right now I do have a cave that's within an hour of my house that I'm exploring. There's 10 kilometers of passages, and there's also some endangered species inside the cave that have never been recorded, living and reproducing inside a cave environment. So it's pretty exciting. And so I'm doing some work there and continuing to hope that soon we have a vaccine and can get back to business. I have only one project that so far has not been canceled for the year. That's with Bob Ballard out in the Channel Islands off his Nautilus boat. Bob's the guy that found the Titanic, that for those who don't know. And we're doing some cave exploration in the Channel Islands off California, and he has a research vessel, and it looks like the project might not get canceled because they may fly us into California, quarantine us for 14 days before getting on the ship, and then doing our work, and then I'll have to quarantine my way home.
Jill, just a quick question regarding that. I mean, it's not the kind of caves that you explore. I mean, this is not the kind of thing where a guy goes on a hike and he sees a cave and now he explores it. I mean, how are these caves actually found and then decided on that we need to see what's going on? I mean, how does that kind of process work?
Well, in terms of my own personal exploration, a lot of it starts with maps, Google Maps, and then bushwhacking to places where we think the geology looks right, and then also local knowledge, talking to people about caves. In the cases of like the Channel Islands, this work with Bob Ballard, these are sea caves at many different depth levels. So caves that were formed during lower ocean levels by the action of waves pounding against a rocky shoreline and creating opening up a crevice basically and enlarging that into a longer cave system. In terms of those particular caves, he first did some side scan sonar work offshore and then some deep ROV work, and then got to the point where it's like, okay, none of these technologies are as good as sending a person in there. and so we go with our rebreathers and explore these places, and some of them pan out to be great cave systems, and some of them don't. But that's why it's exploration.
Is there a unicorn cave? One that's the big one that you have not done yet, that you like? That's the big.
Yeah. So there's a couple places in the South Pacific, in Micronesia, that I'm really interested in. So these are places that would have been former occupation, like sites with former human occupation, that have now subsided geologically, and we don't really understand all the mechanics of it. So there was one particular cave that's 1,000 feet deep that has speleothems, like cave formations in it. So it has, for some reason, geologically subsided, because we don't know that ocean levels were ever that low, that those could have been formed when it was dry. So I've always been interested in that, and then recently learned of a couple other systems in the area that are probably in the 400 to 500 foot depth range, so are accessible. And so, yeah, I'm working on a pitch for that.
1,000 feet. That's roughly 350 odd meters.
Yeah, the only way I'm going there is in a newt suit. but the 400 to 500 foot range is accessible. Yeah.
Now, again, and I'm saying this with the utmost respect, you are much tougher than I am. Just thinking again, it's like that nude suit. You think you can do it? Like, lovely. I don't think I can even get into that.
Oh my gosh, that's my bucket list thing, is to pilot the nude suit.
Oh, really?
Love to do that. Yeah.
Oh, that's glorious. No, yes, I could talk for hours. You're probably one of my most favorite people that we've interviewed so far.
I'm
sure.
I think again, you're hard as nails. You're very tough, and especially in the mental game, it's something that I'm like I said, I'm almost halfway through your book already. So a very interesting life. There's a lot of stuff that I really look up to you, and yes, I wish you all the luck. We're gonna follow your other expeditions and adventures a lot more closer right now. Again, it's amazing. It boggles the mind at what is capable. Yeah, like I said, I'm really impressed with the work that you've done. It's crazy. It's crazy good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jill, I mean, we would. I'm sure I speak for Grobs as well. We would love to have you back again in the future. I mean, I've got some stuff that I haven't even touched on with you. If you would be willing to have us, we would love to have you back on the show sometime.
Absolutely.
It's something that what we will have to talk about in the future is some of the technical stuff about the Thai cave rescue.
Oh yeah. You could do a whole show on that. Yeah.
I think that would be a discussion by itself for a very long period. It's what I'm saying is those guys that died there, the mammoth task that it was ahead, and they actually pulled it off. It's crazy. I'd love to delve a bit deeper into that, but I know that's going to take forever.
That's a whole show. Yeah. I'm happy to come back, and I have got to visit South Africa too, so I hope that I'll meet you in person and come down.
Please, if you are ever in our neck of the woods, we will take it personally if you don't make contact with us.
Okay. Awesome.
No, please, you are more than welcome here, and if the opportunity is there, we will gladly show you around, and we will not dive with you, but we will show you around.
I'll dive a little bit with you, shallow, not deep.
I'll float on the surface.
I'll do it.
Look at you.
Like being in the water. I don't necessarily want to be doing all these tech dives. So show me your stuff.
But you know what? We'll go show you the little seahorses in the Neisner Lagoon. Ankle deep. Beautiful.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right.
I think everybody will agree with me. It's such an interesting subject matter, and again, your mental approach and your mental capacity and capabilities, and the sheer volume and difficulty of the things that you got done. It's amazing. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. Yeah,
it's been fun talking to you.
Thank you so much. I mean, from our side as well. I mean, you didn't hesitate one moment when I asked you to come on the show, and it's been a pleasure for me dealing with you this past week, because it's not often that that guys share that they're coming on the show and whatnot. So it's lekker that you took to it as well. We thoroughly appreciate it from our side.
And guys, please go get a book. She's just got a book out.
Tell us about the book.
Into the Planet. Come, Joel. You have
My Life as a Cave Diver. I think you can get it on Amazon in South Africa. Certainly, there's an ebook and an audiobook. You can.
I got the ebook on Amazon in South Africa. So it's available. Yeah.
The hard copies are a little bit tougher, especially with shipping these days.
I will make a plan. I want a signed hard copy, and I will figure out a way to get me one. But I want one.
Okay.
But yeah, guys, thank you so much for tonight, Jill. And guys, please like and subscribe to the Facebook and the YouTube channel. And as usual, thanks to all our partners, Everyday Carry South Africa, Kimberf Concepts, Paratus.info. And of course our producers, Renegade Media. Thanks to you guys for always sharing and making this possible.
Actually getting us on this road. Yeah, they got us going. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much, guys. And Jill, just stay on for me for a moment while I end this show. Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.